My name is Richard August, and I'll be your host. Welcome to this special one-hour edition of State of the State. Our guest, our state representative, Julie Casimiro, a Democrat whose district encompasses parts of North Kingstown and Exeter, and Casimiro and Vella-Wilkinson, also a Democrat, from District 21 in Warwick. Both appeared on this program, I believe, at the end of their first term in office. Ladies, welcome back to State of the State.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Representative Casimiro, you are very interested in the topic of vaping, which is the use of electronic cigarettes to replace tobacco cigarettes and cigars. Now, Governor Raimondo has come out strongly against selling flavored vaping products to anyone. Explain your position on this issue.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you for having us back here. I am very interested in vaping, and I'm hoping to introduce my legislation this week. When the problems around vaping came out about, 6 months ago, I was originally in favor of a flavor ban. I am no longer in that mindset right now. I've actually sat down with a lot of the stakeholders, people who own vape shops, people who have quit smoking using vaping products, and I've really done my due diligence, and prohibition is not the answer. I think that we need tighter regulations. I think we need stricter laws around it, and the 21 plus adult vape shop, adult only vape shops. Prohibition does not work, so I'm not supporting a flavor ban.
So the legislation that you are going to introduce, what are some of these regulatory changes that you're going to propose?
So we're going to put harsher penalties around any adult who's buying vape products for kids people under 21 years old, kids under 21 who are caught with vaping products, stiffer penalties. 21 only vape shops, you can't even walk in with your 18-year-old. It's only 21 only vape shops. They are going to be able to sell flavored vaping products like strawberry milk and chocolate cake or whatever they are. But these vaping products do help people quit smoking. Vaping products have been around for a number of years. We've only had a problem in the last maybe 6 months when the THC products came into play and the vitamin E oils came into play. So
the THC is the hallucinogenic element of marijuana.
Correct.
And what was the other one you just said?
Vitamin E oils. Vitamin E oils going directly into somebody's lung.
I see. So you're not suggesting that flavored vaping products be sold in these like convenience stores or gas stations that
absolutely
be a vape shop specific?
Yes, adult only vape shops, because I actually was in a convenience store in North Kingstown, our district, and I actually watched a young woman come into the store, purchase a Juul product, and she was never carded. Now, was she over 21? I don't know. Was she under 21? I don't know, but the question never came up. And as she left the store, I asked the gentleman behind the counter, and he just kind of like shrugged his shoulders at me like he didn't really care. So yeah, I think convenience stores this doesn't have a place in convenience stores. Okay,
so now you know the governor is pushing for legalization of recreational marijuana, probably looking at the revenue that's being garnered in Massachusetts. Is she being consistent? Is vaping more dangerous than smoking pot?
I think smoking pot is far more dangerous. I can never support that until law enforcement signs off on it. I know that the state police colonel has come out in favor of recreational marijuana. I'm not there yet. I think that we have breathalyzers to determine if someone's under the influence of alcohol. We have nothing to determine if someone's under the influence of marijuana. In our district is Electric Boat, and they are adamantly against recreational marijuana because there are some serious consequences if someone shows up to work under the influence. And I totally understand that. And until we can find a way that something that makes law enforcement happy, I can't support recreational marijuana at this time.
Do you have a position on vaping or recreational marijuana?
Actually, I feel the same way that Rep. Casimiro does. Some of the best paying jobs that we have in the state of Rhode Island are at Electric Boat. And our federal delegation has worked diligently to make sure that Electric Boat has been at the top of the list with regards to submarine contracts. That's a lot of jobs that are being left vacant because they're having a hard time finding people that can pass the urinalysis test. And that's without recreational marijuana. So I just don't think it's a good idea. I'm not real pleased at the idea of us balancing our state budget on the legalization of marijuana.
Would you co-sponsor Representative Casimiro's bill on the vaping issue?
I'd have to read the legislation first, but it sounds like it's much more in line. On the off session, several of us from Warwick went to some of the vape shops, and we spoke to the smoke shop owners to see what the governor's ban was having in terms of an impact. And their feeling was they don't want to see any of the counterfeit solutions either, because that hurts their business. But to just paint everyone with the same wide brush, that's sometimes that type of a reaction is what gives us, justifiably so, in my humble opinion, a reputation of being anti-small business.
Can I add to that? Because I think by putting a ban on flavored products and putting some of these small businesses out of business, again, we're not pro-business, but you're going to create a bigger and potentially more dangerous black market for these products, because if someone's not getting them at a vape shop, they're going to get them some way or another, whether it's on the internet, coming in through China, somebody's car trunk at a convenience store, I don't know, but prohibition is going to create a bigger and potentially more dangerous black market.
The issue of vaping, I think you alluded to the fact that, especially among high school students, it seems that they are including the THC. Yeah.
THC.
I can't remember what the initials are, but the stuff they're smoking is way more powerful than the old marijuana reefers that go back many years. Especially in the schools, even though your legislation would specify over 21, how do schools control this type of situation?
I've had a serious conversation with our superintendent, and right now, the president put into law you have to be 21 years or older. Kids are still vaping in the bathrooms at the high school and at the junior high schools. It's a serious problem. One, I'm going to ask, where are the parents in all of this? What are the parents doing? Because they've got to play a role in this. I was told that in some schools they have to actually lock the restrooms to keep kids out from vaping. It's horrible, and the problem is and I just from working with people that I've worked with, one who I want to bring on the show at some point, it's like Juul is the enemy. Juul has gotten kids addicted to the nicotine. They've got the nicotine rush, and the nicotine milligrams is really, really high in Juul. But they're marketed it as a product that is less dangerous than cigarettes. And it's really not. It's worse than cigarettes. And these kids are just getting addicted to the nicotine and the nicotine rush. And I mean, we've got star athletes in North Kingstown addicted to the nicotine rush, and it's awful.
Representative Vella-Wilkinson, you're a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, as is Representative Casimiro. And I believe both of you support the creation of an oversight committee over the Veterans Affairs Department, currently headed up by Casimiro.
Yes.
Tell our audience about that, and why do you think an oversight over that specific department is required?
Thank you, Dick. I was very pleased that Representative Casimiro co-sponsored this bill with me. I think it's an extremely important bill, and I'm very active in the veterans community. It's a bill that the veterans themselves throughout the state of Rhode Island have honestly demanded. It's something that I worked on through the off session. And the reason that I had wanted to work on this in particular is because direct to yawn is a cabinet level position, which all of us as veterans were happy to see that we were at least recognized as being a large portion of the population, and that we warranted having someone that was a cabinet level position. However, Director Yawn is taking his orders from the governor. He's part of the executive branch. The Joint Veterans Oversight Committee would be working on behalf of the veterans. And as elected officials, our chain of command starts and ends with our constituents. And that's something that the veterans in the state unfortunately have been missing.
So this would be a joint committee, Senate and House?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have Senate sponsors on that side? Have you talked to anybody on the other side of the rotunda?
Yes, I've spoken to Mark McKenney. I work with him very closely. He's another Warwick legislator. Dawn Oyer is very pro-veteran, and she's very interested in it as well. There are a few of the senators who've indicated that they were interested. Of course, we have the support of the Senate President as well as the Senate leader, Mike McCaffrey.
So not too long ago, amid a lot of fanfare, the state opened a new $120 million nursing and assisted living home for veterans in Bristol. The place is running at a serious deficit, and its director, retired General Rick Backus, resigned as a result. Now, the Veterans Affairs Director, Casimiro Yarn, is a retired naval officer, as are you, Representative.
Yes.
I believe the tradition in the Navy is that the captain is responsible for whatever happens on his ship.
Yes.
So how has Director Yarn escaped criticism for what's going on at the Vets Home?
Well, Director Yarn has not escaped criticism. He might have escaped some criticism from the governor, although she said that at one point she was disappointed in leadership. With Director Yarn being the director, you can't get any higher in that chain of command than he is. General Backus stepped down, but there were things that were brought up in the Finance Committee this past week that during the questions that both Director Yarn answered and the Adjutant General, Chris Callahan, answered, the information had been provided months prior to when they claimed that things were made aware to them. And the reason I know about it is because I went through all of the minutes of the Veterans Advisory Committee for the last 2 years since they've been in the new location. So one of the questions had to do with the deficit. And one of my colleagues on finance said to Director Yarn, when did you first find out about the deficit from the Marriott housekeeping contract? And the director said he knew basically a year ago, January 2019. And that wasn't true. The fact of the matter is that at a meeting, Director Yarn was present, General Backus reported to the committee that there was a significant deficit with the Marriott maintenance contract. So he reported it in October. When I questioned Director Yarn, he said to me, well, I didn't do anything until January because that was when we were going to have the next budget meeting. Now, Dick, I'm not a CPA, but if you have such a significant deficit, why would you sit on that information and let it continue for 3 months and you do nothing because you're waiting for the next meeting? You certainly have the authority to call an emergency meeting. Yeah. At least if I was in a leadership role like that, I would have called for an emergency meeting.
I think no one argues that those who honorably serve our country should not have assistance in their senior years or if they are experiencing severe poor health. I guess my question, should the Vets Home be run in a manner comparable to a private nursing home or assisted living facility? Should that be the goal?
I think in terms of the quality of the service, absolutely yes. But in terms of asking the veterans to forfeit 90 or 100% of their net income, no, absolutely not.
Now, I know from personal experience that at privately run facilities like this, that friends and family of residents do not get to eat free meals. And I guess I'm wondering, should this be the case at the Vets Home? Because a great deal was made of the fact that they would be required to pay for their meals.
The veterans that are residing in the home themselves are not making an issue of the fact that their family members are not having a meal with them. There is a snack bar, and I could tell you that when I go to the home to visit friends of mine, I will often call them ahead of time and say, what do you feel like eating today? And I'll bring something in. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing, quite frankly. No, I don't think that that's truly the issue. I think the real issue was the loss of occupational therapy and physical therapy, especially when they were able to have it several times a week at their convenience in the home. And now they're being shoved in a van and schlepped up to Providence, to the VA hospital, yes, of course. Yeah. And I think that's more problematic than whether or not a family member can have a grilled cheese sandwich with the veteran.
Now, the Marriott, were they responsible for the meals or housekeeping? I'm not sure what their contract was.
I believe that that was the housekeeping contract, and I'm waiting to see what the housekeeping contract consists of, to be honest with you, because the numbers just seem astronomical. So you remember, the home was originally vertical, it was a building, all right, and now they're in pods or communities. So the maintenance of a facility like that is going to be significantly more than if you're just dealing with a straight box of a building. I mean, just by the fact that now instead of only having one roof, they have 7, all right? They have 7 kitchens and so forth. And the HVAC system is significantly more because it's covering 7 different neighborhoods.
Representative Casimiro, you are sponsoring legislation that would limit the DCYF child advocate to a single 5-year term after confirmation by the Senate of the governor's appointee. How does this differ from the situation today? Why do we need to have?
So currently, the child advocate is appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate for a 5-year term. I want to duplicate that for the director of DCYF. Oftentimes, and it was prevalent in our oversight hearings, that Dr. Picola was there at the whim of the governor, and we would ask her questions that everyone in the room knew answers to, but she would not answer the question because she was carrying the water of the governor. We need someone at the helm of DCYF who can run DCYF without consequences to making the tough decisions. Jennifer Griffith is an amazing child advocate. She does the good, the bad, the ugly. She tells it like it is. We need a director at DCYF to do the same thing, and that's that piece of legislation. And that's what I was going back with when I said about Director Yarn. It's the same thing with all cabinet level appointees. They should be able to do their job without worry of repercussions from the governor, because they might say something that makes her look bad. And I think that's a real problem for us right now. In oversight, whether it's MTM, whether it's DCYF, whether it's UHIP, we get people in front of us that won't answer questions, or they shrug their shoulders because they don't want to make the governor look bad. But in the end, like, these departments are not running efficiently.
Don't we have to be careful with 5-year terms, though, because the governor only serves for 4 years? Yes, limited to 2 terms, but a governor could become incapacitated or take a different job with an administration in D.C. So if you have a 5-year term, there would be an overlap to a new administration. So is 5 years a good idea, or should it be 4?
It could be whatever you want it to be. I just want it to be something where we have people who are put in position who are allowed to do their jobs without repercussions of making the governor look bad.
And they would not be eligible for say it's a 4-year term. New governor comes in, appoints a person to, let's say, DCYF, Veterans Affairs, whatever the department is. At the end of that governor's term, that's it, and the person would not be eligible for reappointment?
Oh, absolutely. If they're doing a good job, like Jennifer Griffith, I would appoint her for the next 20 years. She's doing such a great job, but she's not afraid to tell it like it isn't. She's not afraid to ask the hard questions. I remember Dr. Picola sitting in front of us in oversight, and we would ask her questions that everybody in the room, even our oversight members, knew the answer to, and she wouldn't answer the question because she didn't want to make the governor look bad. We had another director come in front of us who was responsible for UHIP and MTM. And I said to him, do you realize that if you were in the private sector, you would have been fired? And he just looked at me and shrugged his shoulders. Like,
what is tell our audience, MTM?
MTM is the Transportation Management System for our vulnerable citizens. But it's like, he just sat there and shrugged his shoulders. Like, we need accountability in government. We just can't let, the same old and expect different results. It's crazy.
Yep. Representative Vella-Wilkinson, you're sponsoring the pharmacist expansion bill for greater access to birth control. Tell our audience about this legislation and why you think it's needed.
Thank you, Dick. The bill actually enlarges the responsibilities that pharmacists would have with additional training so that they would be able to prescribe birth control, not just the renewal of birth control, but actually for a first-time user of birth control. I think it's important for a couple of different reasons. I mean, first of all, I don't see any reason why birth control for women should be less accessible than birth control for men. The other thing is that the states, and according to a CDC study, the states that had put this law into effect realized a 25% drop in abortions from the 18 to 25-year-old demographic, and that is significant. So I see this as a way to offer an alternative for women so that their reproductive rights are being respected. However, there's also still a great respect for life because of the after effect of the down number in abortions.
Now, you said some additional training for pharmacists. My God, these people go to school now for 7 years. When I was in college, it was a 5-year program. Now, I think it's 7 years. What additional training would you envision? They usually know more about pharmaceuticals than the doctor does.
Right, but when it comes to prescribing birth control, there would be a process that would have to take place. Part of it would be a self-survey. Then there would be some follow-on questions that they would have to ask to make sure that there isn't going to be any unintended consequences from the birth control and so forth. And that would be something that would be determined by the Department of Health and the Pharmacists Association. Brown University is very much in favor. The pharmacists themselves are in favor of it as well because they are a greatly underutilized healthcare professional.
Mm-hmm. Now, Representative Casimiro, you and Representative Vella-Wilkinson, excuse me, Vella-Wilkinson are members of the House Judiciary Committee that hears all proposed firearms legislation. Now, one of the measures being pushed early in this session is H7102 Substitute A that would prohibit so-called 3D printed firearms and guns that are undetectable and untraceable. Now, the original bill before the Sub-A dealt with these types of guns, and the bill was amended to include so-called ghost guns, which are assembled from components. Federal law already deals with these guns and requires that the fabricator mark the gun with an identifying number. The Second Amendment Coalition chief lobbyist said the organization was neutral on the original bill. So the question is, why was the bill amended and why were unidentifiable guns already outlawed by federal law? Why were they included at the last minute? Representative Casimiro, why don't you take that one?
I wasn't there for the hearings. I had another hearing to go to that night. I know that the bill was amended because of the effective date. It was going to be effective upon passage, but they wanted to make it so it was effective 90 days because they don't want law-abiding citizens to become criminals overnight. And that's the part that I know of. I didn't really stay for all the hearings because I had another hearing that night.
So, to your knowledge, would a person who has assembled a gun from components, either one of you can take this one, if it was assembled and they properly mark it with an identifying number, would they be considered to be in violation of the law that as amended, the proposed bill that's amended?
As far as I know, as long as they properly, as long as properly identified, is my understanding.
Okay. So I suspect this bill is in response to the allegation by the state police that 11 of the 52 guns they seized in the motorcycle gang raids last year were so-called undetectable or ghost guns. And isn't this kind of bill, when they start adding these amendments, isn't this another reaction to an incident that's just used by the anti-gun lobby to advance their agenda?
You and I talk about this all the time. No bill.
Don't give away any secrets.
No bill is going to stop gun violence, and then that's just the way it is. No bill will stop gun violence. Do we need more common sense gun legislation? Maybe, but I think that we all agree that no bill is going to stop gun violence because if someone wants to commit an act of mass shooting or gang violence, they're going to do it, whether we have a ghost gun law in place or not.
Representative Vella-Wilkinson, the other piece of gun control legislation being pushed early on in this session is the expansion of the state background checks for firearm purchases. And this is, again, I think, in reaction to the situation in Westerly where an individual went into an assisted living where he lived and shot and killed one woman and wounded two others. He legally purchased a revolver in Richmond before this situation. Now, the bill would require anyone selling a firearm, and I want to emphasize that it's not just dealers. In the state of Rhode Island, any private citizen that sells a firearm to another citizen is required by law to run a background check just as a dealer would have to do. You have to notify the town in which you are located, the town in which the buyer resides, and the state police. Now, as a firearms owner myself, I have no objection to adding the requirement that the town where the buyer resides be notified. But in the past, the state police have testified at other hearings that they do not want the responsibility of running background checks on every firearm sale in the state. The only place they do it for now is Exeter, which doesn't have its own police department. So you are the only Democrat that joined with the Republicans in opposing this bill. Would you tell us why, please?
It's exactly for the reason that you just said, Dick. I mean, I was at the hearings, and quite frankly, I felt that if we were on the floor and the amendment had been proposed, and I want to say that it came from a discussion that Leader Filippi was involved in, and then we went at rest for a little bit when Leg Counsel downstairs works on the language. First of all, I don't see what the hurry was. Second of all, there was no way of knowing whether or not the state police were going to be able to live up to the requirement that we were placing on them. And several of the representatives' attitudes as they were talking, either out loud or in discussion, was, well, don't worry about what they want. This is what they're going to have to do. Well, that's not the way to create a law. So I voted my conscience. I did not feel that was the right thing to do. The other thing is, I'm still not convinced that doing that isn't the first step towards creating a directory. What is going to happen to the information? Because they could send it by an email. That's the other thing. If they want to send it by email, how long are they going to keep the email? Who's going to have access to that email? Where is that email going to be stored? So there were too many questions, and I just didn't care for that. I felt that we were moving too fast.
So the bill passed in the House. Is it over in the Senate now? Is that where we stand? I
was under the impression that it initially passed in the Senate, but I think the Senate, because we're bicameral, would have to pass it with the same language.
With the same language that the House or the two committees have jointly get together and work out?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Representative Casimiro, you were recently named in a letter from Reverend Bucci, the pastor of a Catholic church in West Warwick, as one of the legislators not welcome to receive communion or participate in one of the ministries at the Mass because of your support of the abortion bill passed in the last session. In fact, I understand that you're receiving some national attention from various media. Do you think Father Bucci crossed the line between separation of church and state with his letter?
I think he crossed the line. I'm not necessarily sure it's separation of church and state, because we don't have a Church of the United States. I think he definitely crossed the line. If this was truly about the vote we took on Roe versus Wade, and let me just be clear, all we did was codify existing law of the land. If this was truly about Roe versus Wade, he would have published this list 9 months ago when we took the vote. This is clearly about retaliation to the Hagen-McEntee family for their shining the spotlight on sexual abuse in the church, and specifically Sacred Heart Parish. There were a number of us on that flyer that he put into the Sunday Bulletin. Some of the names were highlighted, some weren't. Some of the reps received mail at their home with the flyer in it. I did not, but Representative McEntee did. I live in North Kingstown, she lives in South Kingstown. What's the differential? Why didn't I receive it? And Father Bucci was on TV last night saying that he doesn't understand why we're so upset, because no one has ever died from pedophilia, but kids have died from abortion.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm a little concerned that Father Bucci is out of touch with reality, and Bishop Tobin's silence on this is deafening. He literally said on TV last night, no one has ever died from pedophilia.
But Father Bucci, not Bishop.
Right, but Father Bucci ultimately reports up to, Bishop Tobin. I think Bishop Tobin needs to take a stand on this. He's clearly attacking the Hagen-McEntee family. Representative McEntee was at a family funeral in December, and she was asked to do the second reading, and she got up and she said, all she said was good morning, and Father Bucci told her to shut up and get out. That's not the God that I know, and my God would never do that. So I just think that the Catholic Church, and specifically Sacred Heart, really need to rethink their stand on how they're treating people, how they're treating their parishioners, and maybe this is why they're losing following.
Could you explain to the audience exactly what your position is on the abortion on demand, or whatever you want to call it?
All right, so just because you're pro-choice doesn't mean you're pro-abortion. I never have, never could, and never would. That's my decision. It's not the decision between me and the federal government. And that's my stand on it. It's a woman's right to choose. Again, because you're pro-choice does not mean you're pro-abortion.
The bill that was passed or named didn't talk about pro-choice, though. It called it a Reproductive Health Act. So even if, which would imply that it is a fact a woman might have an issue where her health would be impaired, or she might even lose her life as a result of the pregnancy. But the bill, as you said, codifies Roe v. Wade, which basically says you can have an abortion pretty much any time during your pregnancy.
I believe it excluded late-term abortions.
The bill, okay. Representative Vella-Wilkinson, another bill you're the co-sponsor of is the Oscar Climate Control Grant Expansion Bill for municipalities. Can't you get them down?
The Oscar bill, yes.
Engage in the program. Tell our audience about this Oscar program.
Well, there's a common refrain that comes from the municipalities that the state has unpaid, we have unfunded mandates. And what the Oscar bill will do is that it sets up a grant for funds for municipalities that decide that they're going to take actions as a result of climate, for climate control. For instance, if they decide that because of the heavy rains, they want to put in rain gardens in areas to stop the erosion. We've done that in Warwick, right around Oakland Beach. And a lot of other municipalities have done that type of thing as well. So that if the municipality has a plan, they would be able to come to the state for the grant money. And so there would be a 5-cent per barrel fee that would be attached, and that 5 cents, that extra 5 cents, would go into a restricted fund for the Oscar program. Now, the governor has put something similar in her budget, but in her case, she wanted only 3 cents to go to Oscar. She wanted to raise the fee 10 cents per barrel, and 3 cents would go to the Oscar program. The other 7 cents, I'm not sure where that other 7 cents would be spent.
Another scoop.
Possibly.
Yeah. So, do you recall there was an Oscar program many years ago, like going back probably to the Kachuri administration? Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, okay. I had kind of an interesting story about that. This is not the same thing. But suppose a municipality came to this, applied for a grant, and said, we want to use the money to clean up the roadways in town from trash, because environmentally it's unsightly and it's a rodent, whatever. Would that be covered under that grant?
No, I don't believe so, Dick, because this truly is as a result of the climate change.
Okay, because I'll share this little anecdote with you. My son and his friend applied back in the day when they were in high school, and the Oscar program was exactly that. They were supposed to clean up roadways. And I said to him after the first day, or first couple of days, how's it going? He said, well, we only clean up Anaquidnucket Road from the high school to Boston Neck Road. And then the high school student who had a driver's license would be given a town truck, and they would use that, and he would bring us down to the town beach for the rest of the day and pick up. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, the workers at DPW complained that we were taking work away from them, so every day we had this short stretch of road to clean up. So I get a little leery of government grants sometimes, I guess. I'm sorry to say that experience. But Representative Casimiro, you have endorsed former Vice President Joe Biden for the Democratic Party's nomination for president. Now, his candidacy seems to be imploding since the Iowa caucuses, where, as far as anybody can tell, he came in fourth, and he seems to be faltering in the New Hampshire primary, almost admitting defeat the other night at a rally. Can you tell us, why do you support Joe Biden, and why did you come out for him so early in the race?
I love Joe Biden. I think he's a great guy. I think he's probably one of the most qualified candidates. Yes, we've had some missteps along the way. Perhaps I should have waited in my endorsement, but I think that out of anyone that is on the stage right now, I think he's probably the most experienced person to do the job. But that said, I know he imploded in Iowa, and he's not looking so good in New Hampshire either. So
are there any other candidates in the field that you might be able to support?
I'm afraid to say.
Well, I'm thinking you said qualified. There is Tom Steyer, who's a very successful businessman, as his first name, Peter Yang. They're both very successful, prosperous businessmen. They clearly know how to run their businesses. Wouldn't they? Don't you think that would, after all, the president we have came out of business. He wasn't a politician.
Right. I think
either.
I'm probably going to reserve my next endorsement until after the New Hampshire primary.
Why? Do you have any that you would be able to support, do you think?
I like Tulsi. I like Tulsi Gabbard. I really do.
How did she do it? I don't remember how she did in Iowa. She didn't score too well there.
No, she didn't.
And do you think she's doing better in New Hampshire?
It's hard to say.
The taping after this taping, New Hampshire will have it, so we don't really know what's going to happen. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how, in a regular primary format, all of them do. I think this time. Mayor
Pete and Amy Klobuchar seem to be really rising in the rankings.
Yeah. Open question. Former Republican Representative Bob Lancia announced today that he is going to challenge 20-year incumbent Congressman Jim Langevin in November for the 2nd Congressional District seat. Do either of you think Bob Lancia has any chance of defeating Jim Langevin, or is Jim's seat safe at least until the 2020 census? We may lose a seat in the House of Representatives, but do you think he has any chance?
This is one I'll go out on a limb with. No, he doesn't have a chance.
You're really out.
Yeah, I really don't think so. I know, I believe that Bob Lancia's heart is in the right place, and he does a tremendous amount of work and outreach in the various minority communities throughout the state, but I don't know that it's enough to create a groundswell of support for him.
Did you have any experience with him while he was a state rep? Did you find that he was crossed the aisle easily, or was he pretty much following what Minority Leader either Morgan or Philippi told him?
No, actually, I co-sponsored a number of veterans bills with Bob Lancia, and I knew Bob and worked with him while I was still on the Warwick City Council. Again, for veterans issues. Very, very passionate, very hardworking, very earnest.
And as members of Veterans Affairs, we went to a number of events together. He was a very kind man, very nice man, easy to work with, easy to talk to. I don't know that he has the name recognition across the state.
Okay. Representative Casimiro, there's a couple other bills. I think one of them that you are working on called Out of School Time Learning Bill. Tell us about that one.
So last year I sponsored a commission to look at out of school time learning, which is before school and after school time care/learning. And we're really looking to increase the quality of that programming. So a lot of times parents who are working might drop their child off at the Boys and Girls Club in the morning. and the Boys and Girls Club will get them to school, pick them up after school, and take care of them until mom and dad come home. That's learning time, and we're really trying to increase the quality of that. So that bill is being introduced this week. We're going to be asking for $2 million to invest in quality programming, because the programming really needs to be elevated as far as quality goes. Are we going to get $2 million in the budget? No, but if we can get something, that's a start to improve the out-of-school time learning for our kids.
Who would come up with what a quality time is? RIDE?
Yes, we're going to charge RIDE to do the RIDE and DHS, because DHS is very, very involved in that right now. So I actually went to a conference with Director Hawkins, and we went to, I think it was DC that we go to, and we had it was all about quality learning programs. So I think between RIDE administering the funds and DHS monitoring the quality, I think it's a baby step that we're going to be taking in out-of-school time learning. But there's a lot of kids in care right now in out-of-school time learning programs, and there's a lot more on the waiting list. So
now, I think you referred to Warwick, and I know at Oakland Beach School in Warwick, the kids, I've seen the kid, my grandchildren used to go there, and I would see kids running across to the Boys and Girls Club, which is diagonally across the street. I just have a problem with this idea that kids are ending their school day and they're going to go across the street and have quality learning time. They want to play basketball.
And that's the problem that we're facing. Is like after school time learning should not be a kid in a gymnasium with a basketball. It should be a child doing their homework with supervision or doing enrichment programming and things like that. It shouldn't be a child in a gymnasium playing basketball with a babysitter. And that's what we're trying to get away from.
Who, maybe either one of you, since this is in Warwick, who is actually monitoring these kids at the Boys and Girls Club or whatever facility they go to? Are they, I don't know, are they physical instructors, or are they just...
Because the pay is so low in those positions, it's basically one body that is overseeing the kids. So if we can get the pay up, which we're hoping to do by this investment in quality, out-of-school time care, out-of-school time learning, we'll get more qualified people to do this. But right now, it's hard to find people at minimum wage to do this kind of work.
A lot of times it's other students.
Yes, absolutely.
So what kind of people would you be looking for? Certified teachers to do this?
No, but somebody who might be going to RIC or URI for early childhood learning or things like that. So, but we've got to attract quality participants, or quality instructors.
I think there was one other bill that you were working on that you and I mentioned last week when we had a cup of coffee together. What is that other bill?
So the other bill that I'm working on has been around for quite a few years, but it's a parole bill for junior offenders. And this bill has been around for a few years, and it has a lot of starts and stops to it. But I've been basically working on this bill for probably 6 months with all the stakeholders. I've met with Steve Dambrook from the AG's office. I've met with all of the different violence organizations. I've worked with families. I've worked with victims. And basically, if a juvenile is sentenced to life without parole, the parole hearing comes up at 25 years. Everybody knows that young offenders rehabilitate at a much better rate than older offenders. So we're just simply trying to get their parole hearing at 15 years instead of 25. It does not guarantee them parole. It just gives them the opportunity for parole. The parole board supports this. We've got I don't think we have any opposition on the bill, and it only affects maybe 5 or 6 offenders. I've been to some gang step down programs at the ACI, and these gentlemen, and I say that they are gentlemen. They have done their homework. They're rehabilitated. They are smart. They articulate very well, and it's just, if we can get them back in society functioning as productive citizens, then that's what we should be doing.
Representative, would you be able to support that bill?
I went to the step-down graduation with Rep. Casimiro as her invited guest, but I have to tell you, in Warwick, it chills us to the bone because of Craig Price. And I lived in the neighborhood when that took place. A lot of people are still there, and his name, I think, still gives people.
It's actually called people sometimes refer to it as the Craig Price bill, but we've actually put in language, and I've worked with Lita Sicacci on this, and Erin Lynch Prada. We've put in language to affect heinous crimes, and we put in a start date of 1991 because Craig Price was sentenced before 91. So this would never, ever, ever help. I mean, Craig Price is never getting out of prison, but it would prevent Craig Price type people from ever getting out because of the heinous crime issue.
But if Craig Price hadn't done what he did before he reached parole age, he would have been on the streets.
Yeah, but no. he was bad all the way through.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So this would be a program that really focused on the people that seem to be rehabilitated or rehabilitatable, correct?
Rehabilitated.
Okay. So it's not just, I may be able to do this in the future.
No, it's rehabilitated.
Representative Vella-Wilkinson, do you have any other bills that we haven't talked about that you have an interest in?
Yes, actually, I have a couple of bills dealing with sexual harassment. One is the Military Sexual Trauma Confidentiality Act. I like those long names.
Yeah, you do.
And I believe, Julie, that you're a co-sponsor of that one as well. So what I found was that quite a number of the women, if they have a sexual trauma while they're in the National Guard, and the Guard identifies it as a complex investigation, in other words, that there isn't any clear-cut evidence, then the victim has the ability to go to the municipality where the bad act took place. Well, we have a lot of members of the Guard that are in law enforcement full-time, whether it's the AG's office or the local town or city or even the state police.
Or correctional officers.
Or correctional officers. And we've had problems in the past where when the victim would go to the local police to file the complaint, before that individual got back to the base the following day, all of the information was throughout the base. And all of a sudden, witnesses started getting amnesia, or they were afraid to come forward because of retribution from the perpetrator. And so what this act would do is it would erect a wall around the victim, the male or female victim, so that not to interfere or impede the investigation, but so that none of the information could be shared outside of the investigation. So it protects the privacy.
So I remember a year, or this is not a new bill either.
No, it's not.
And I think there was a situation where there was a hearing where the Adjutant General said they didn't have statistics on this that you would share with me. Is my memory
Oh, no,
correct?
you have the perfect memory, which is also part of the reason why we need that oversight committee, Dick, because we have some of these directors and some of the top of the food chain that are just running amok, quite frankly. At the time that the general said that, there was an investigation that was in the process of ongoing. And not only that, but the EEO environmental survey results were abysmal. So, I mean, there's some significant problems.
The thing that amazes me is that the military keeps track of every bean and every bullet, and they can't tell you the number of cases. What was the reason that the Adjutant General said he couldn't give you that statistic?
He said he didn't have that information readily available.
Oh, okay. Let me ask, do either of you support the idea of a state constitutional convention? And this is coming out of left field, I know, but we've had guests who say that it's time for another state constitutional convention. Has there been any discussion on Smith Hill about this at all?
None that I've been involved in.
None that I've participated in, although I will tell you that I have received some emails from constituents, from even outside of the city of Warwick, from residents in Rhode Island who said that they feel that the time has come.
I probably received a handful of those as well.
What do you think about that idea?
I would have to really understand what the implications would be. I mean, I know people are screaming for a line item veto, and I get that. I just don't know what the full impact of what that would look like.
Good point. Line item veto seems to be something that polls show that a majority of Rhode Islanders would like to see. The legislature could do that through an amendment referendum, but they would pass a bill to have that referendum on the next election. Where do you come down on a line item veto? Either one of you, representative?
I was in favor of the line item veto when I was on the city council, but since going to the State House, I'm not. And I'll tell you why. I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the last 2 years, and I haven't looked at the full budget this year, but my rough estimate is that in the last 3 years, we have not received a balanced budget from the governor.
Nope.
It's been balanced based on her assessment of future revenues from permit fees and taxes and so forth. So I don't want to, and not to sound nasty, but I don't want to give line item veto to a governor who, in my humble estimation, would probably get rid of the reduction of the car tax, which our voters want, but she wants that money to spend on something else. So no, not while this governor is in office. I couldn't support it.
I agree. I think that would give the governor way too much power. Do I agree with putting it on the ballot at some point? I have no problem with that. But right now, and I concur with my colleague here, we get a bad budget every year, and then we're expected to fix it. So if we do that, we don't, with line item veto, we don't know that it's really going to happen. It's going to, it's still going to go back to the way she wants it. And I don't know that we can afford to do that right now.
So the argument would be, I'll play the other side, that even if a governor should do a veto of a line item, that veto can be overridden by 2/3 vote.
With a super vote.
With a super vote. So doesn't that protect against what you're, I mean, if people see what's going on, and by the way, I do agree with you that having a budget in which there are anticipated future revenues or anticipated cost savings and efficiencies is not a balanced budget.
No.
Right.
By any stretch. So as legislators, you would see that this is not a good idea. You could overrule that veto, right? You would have,
Right.
any governor's veto of any bill can be overridden by 2/3 vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But again, like we can't balance the budget on recreational marijuana, so.
Right.
yeah, I know, I understand. What other? You said, I think did you say there was another one that you were thinking
Oh,
about?
yes. I've also put in a bill to change the Fair Employment Practices Act in Rhode Island so that it would identify elected officials as employees for purposes of sexual harassment. I don't feel that we are really making a strong statement of support with regards to being respectful of women and men, because men can be victims of sexual harassment. But I don't feel that as legislators, we're doing our full due in order to keep a safe work environment. If we say that if you're at work, you can't sexually harass staff, but if I'm at the State House, I have full rights to, have a blank check and treat the staff any way that I want to. So I want the ability for victims of sexual harassment, those individuals who've been sexually harassed by an elected official, whether it's at the State House or at the City Hall or Town Hall, would have an opportunity to bring that person in and have to answer for their actions.
Very interesting. What do you think about increasing the minimum wage to at least by $1? Do you support that?
I'm in support of raising the minimum wage for certain areas. I think home health care workers definitely need to have a raise of at least $1. But my fear is that some of the jobs that we have really don't warrant a $15 minimum wage, or, I mean, some of our colleagues have said that they want to see the minimum wage go to $22. Really, I don't see that, and not that there's anything against being a Walmart greeter or flipping a burger, but I think that when you're looking at someone making $22 an hour, it should be someone that's in a position that is commensurate with that amount of salary, and that it shouldn't just be because that's the baseline for salaries in the country.
I think that the minimum wage does need to increase. I don't think that the minimum wage was ever meant to be a living wage. And I believe that there, like Neil said, there are some industries that do deserve to be paid more. But like, what's the $15 minimum wage going to do to a hamburger at McDonald's?
And then, how about delivering a pizza?
Right,
Yes.
And then what does that do on the flip side of everything?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think we've had small business people on the program who have said that this would be devastating to the small business community. The concept of a living wage and a minimum wage often gets overlapped, but the minimum wage is an entry-level wage. And I think the average wage paid to hourly paid workers in the state and nationally is far above the minimum wage, even if they're talking about 15, or I think it's above $20. I mean, you go down, look at the electric boat payroll, you're not going to find people that are making $11 or $12
Right,
an hour,
no,
I don't
right.
think. Even if they're pushing a broom cleaning up,
Right.
they're making more than that. So there are jobs. And then you run into the issue, of course, of tipped employees.
Right.
How do you control that? If you're going to guarantee a minimum wage, are you going to tell customers tipping not allowed?
Right.
And then the bartenders and wait staff are going to go, hey, wait a minute.
That's
right.
Or hairdressers or other people who rely on cash tips to supplement their hourly wage. So that's another issue.
I think it's really important that we stay competitive with Connecticut and Massachusetts
Yes.
and our neighboring states. But I just don't think that we should just do everything they do because they're doing it. But I do believe that we need to remain competitive. One of the bills I just introduced again this year would make us competitive with licensing fees for pharmacists. We are so out of whack in that with Connecticut and Massachusetts. Like, I think we're like $280 a year in licensing fees, where they're like $75 and $150 respectively.
The neighboring states are lower than ours.
Lower than us, and it's like, if we want to be business friendly, we've got to be business friendly all the way. So.
Well, we have about a minute left. That went by very quickly, and I really want to thank you both for coming on again. And maybe at the end of the session, we can get back together and talk about some of the things that passed or did not pass. And I want to thank our audience for watching State of the State, and hope that you will stay tuned for future editions. Thank you for joining us.